What if a star were trying to speak to you? Not a distant metaphor, but a real light, silent and insistent, blinking in the sky as if calling your name. Imagine this bright star piercing the night of your soul and illuminating a question you've perhaps long avoided. Why, even seeking the sacred, do I sometimes feel lost? Have you ever experienced this? There are moments when the heart senses a path, but the steps seem stuck on the ground. It is precisely in this interval between restlessness and the call that the morning star the title Mary traditionally gives begins to illuminate. Today, we will reveal the secret of the bright star, Mary and her heavenly messages to the devout, an invitation to listen more attentively to what heaven whispers when everything down here makes too much noise. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. When we talk about spirituality, prophecies and mysteries, the essential doesn't always come wrapped in thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a discreet glow, a peace that doesn't fit with the surrounding chaos, a gentle direction that reorganizes within us what seemed impossible to align. This is why so many devotees look to Medjugorje with respect and prudence, because since the 1980s, it has spoken of conversion, prayer, and fasting. Hope and discernment, words that seem simple, but truly lived, transform destinies. And at the heart of this journey remain the famous 7 unrevealed messages, not as curiosities to collect, but as a reminder that heaven first educates the heart, to then reveal its steps. Perhaps you're wondering if this video is for you. If you feel your faith is weary, if prayer has become a dull routine, if doubts surround you like shadows at dusk, then yes, this star is twinkling on your horizon. Mary's messages, the heavenly revelations that strengthen devotees, are not slogans. They are a daily school of spiritual life. And this is where the practical part begins. Before any secret, there is an inner willingness of those who wish to be guided. This is what spiritual preparation is, making room for the light, even when everything around calls for haste, distraction, and noise. Have you ever experienced this? As we walk, remember, we don't seek spectacles, we seek sure signs. Discernment is not distrust, it is love that knows how to choose. Prayer and fasting are not punishments, they are wings that lift us above the fog. Hope is not naivete. It is the memory of the promise lit when the night seems longest. And the morning star Mary does not replace our freedom, she points the way. Stay with me until the end, because throughout this video, we will weave together symbols, passages, and experiences that many devotees report as they approach this mystery. The feeling that someone is, in fact, leading you gently and firmly, one step at a time. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Perhaps the 7 unrevealed messages speak less of dates and more of inner disposition, less of spectacular events and more of silent conversions, less of curiosity and more of commitment. And if the star calling your name were asking for something simple today, a postponed reconciliation, an extra minute of silence, a short fast to clear your gaze, would you listen? Have you ever experienced this? Breathe, let your mind rest. For a moment, feel how night is not an enemy when there is a constant light guiding the way. The bright star does not compete with the sun. It simply teaches us how to cross the dawn without losing our bearings. And if it is true that heaven prepares before revealing, then it is worth learning the language of this preparation. Let's take the first step together. Now that the question has lit the sky within you, it's time to approach the brightness and understand how this light begins to speak, with simple gestures, to the heart of those who set out on this journey. Before we delve into the heart of these messages, I want to invite you to transform this listening into an encounter. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most. It could be a memory, a prayer that rekindled, a passage that brightened your night. When you comment, you open a window for others to realize they're not alone in this search. And often, your words are the guiding star for someone who's lost their way. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. Each like is like lighting another candle. Each subscription is another step in this journey of faith and discernment that we're building together. If you haven't liked it yet, click like. It's a simple gesture that signals to the platform that this message matters and needs to reach those in need of hope. And if you want to continue following this path of spirituality, prophecy, and mysteries, subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss out when we delve deeper into the next chapters of this journey. I want you to feel this space as a community that listens and supports each other. Sharing your experience, even if only in a few lines, helps flesh out what we're experiencing here. Maybe you tried a short fast and felt peace. Maybe you're struggling to forgive and need prayer. Maybe you just want to give thanks because a little light has shone again. Share what you discover now may surprise you, and your comment could be the confirmation someone needed to persevere. Take another breath. Adjust your heart, for the road opens ahead. Stay with me until the end. Let us approach the first glimmer of these 7 messages, letting the morning star guide us, step by step, to the terrain where revelation meets a prepared heart. The morning star is not just a poetic title given to Mary, it is a symbol laden with meaning. rooted both in Christian tradition and in the human experience of looking to the heavens for guidance. Since ancient times, even before the Christian faith spread throughout the world, entire peoples have used stars as guides to cross deserts and oceans. They were like silent, steady markers that never failed to point the right direction. When the dawn is still dark, it is this star that appears first, breaking the shadows and announcing that day is near. And it is precisely this image that Marian spirituality adopts. Mary, as the one who, in the midst of the spiritual night, appears as a sure sign that the light will soon arrive. But there's something even deeper in this title. The morning star is not the sun, and perhaps that's its beauty. It is not the source of light, but its messenger. It shines not for itself, but to point the way to Christ, the true rising sun. This humility embedded in the symbol teaches us about mindset. Being light doesn't always mean being the center. Sometimes, it means indicating the true center. This realization changes the way we approach our decisions. How often do we get lost because we confuse what is a guide with what is a destination? The guiding star only directs, but it is the traveler who decides to walk. And just as sailors adjusted their sails according to the position of the stars, spiritual life also requires constant adjustments. There's no point in looking at the morning star and continuing on the same course if it points another way. This is where vigilance comes in. Celestial symbols, like the star, invite us to remain alert, to not let ourselves fall asleep. Because the night of the soul can be treacherous. Sometimes silence is fruitful, sometimes it is dangerous. Sometimes calm is trust, sometimes it is complacency. Discernment is what differentiates one from the other. Christian tradition also sees this star as a call to conversion, not conversion as something burdensome, but as the courage to change course when we realize we're straying from our destination. And herein lies the beauty of the symbol. The star never condemns us for having strayed. It simply remains there, constant, until we muster the courage to follow it again. This constancy has a profound impact on those weary of uncertainty. In a world where everything seems temporary, where truths are molded to the taste of the speaker, the morning star remains a reference that does not compromise its position. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when we view the star as merely a bright point in the sky, we can lose sight of the behind-the-scenes dimension of this sign. In biblical tradition, celestial language has always been linked to revelation. Stars were created to mark times and seasons, but also to remind us that there is a hidden order guiding the apparent chaos. And, in this context, Mary, as morning star, is more than a beautiful devotion. She is a spiritual code, a code that, when deciphered, changes not only the way we pray, but also the way we live. Think about the impact of this. Having a light on the horizon that doesn't depend on our strength to shine, but is always ready to redirect us. This is the kind of security that transforms our mindset. When we internalize that there is a faithful guide in the sky, we stop living like someone adrift. We begin to make less impulsive decisions, more aligned with what brings us closer to the true light. And this doesn't mean an absence of challenges. On the contrary, the star will often lead us down narrow paths, because it knows that the shortest route isn't always the safest. It is in this quiet trust that a solid journey is built. The curious thing is that, in the history of apparitions, whether in Medjugorje or elsewhere, celestial symbols always appear at key moments, as if they were the framework for a larger message. They are not there by chance. It is as if heaven speaks not only with words, but also with visible signs to reinforce what has already been spoken to the heart. And, by realizing this, we understand that following the morning star is more than an act of devotion. It is entering a narrative, where every gesture, every and every decision are small coordinates that align us with an eternal destiny. And perhaps this is the greatest hidden revelation this symbol holds. It's not about waiting for the light to arrive, but learning to walk while it shines, even from afar. Because true conversion happens in movement, not in waiting. And it is in this movement that the star gradually shows that there is meaning to each night it goes through. Comment: I'm on this journey too. When we speak of signs appearing in the sky of faith, there's one name that always emerges, as if whispering from afar: Medjugorje. Not because it needs the spotlight, but because since the 1980s, there have been persistent reports of Marian apparitions in that Balkan village. What matters to us here is how this phenomenon has shaped a culture of prayer, fasting, and conversion, and how all of this invites us to a more sober mindset, more attentive to the decisions we make in our daily lives. Speaking of Medjugorje with prudence and respect means recognizing two movements that walk hand in hand. On the one hand, the devotional experience of millions of pilgrims who witness inner transformation, reconciliation, and hope. On the other, responsible discernment, which listens, observes, compares, and is guided by the lights of the Church. This healthy tension avoids both sterile skepticism and uncritical enthusiasm. It's like walking at night, trusting in a star. It guides, but you are the one who sets the pace. Perhaps you've heard stories of healings, conversions, and personal revelations from there. Perhaps someone close to you returned from that place with a different attitude, a different sparkle in their eyes, a real impact on their life. It's legitimate to be interested in the behind the scenes of all this. But it's equally important to remember that the Church invites caution, accompaniment, and the examination of the fruits over time. The image that helps me best is that of a heart that learns to breathe slowly, to better hear what is said. Silence doesn't become abandonment. It becomes a space for understanding. Discernment isn't ice. It's a gentle fire that tests the gold. And it is to this extent that Medjugorje can make sense for those seeking hidden truth without losing touch with reality, as a spiritual laboratory where daily prayer finds coherence, where small decisions are made with greater focus, where the journey is organized around the essential. The devotional literature that emerged from this context repeats a central theme, returning to basics, praying constantly, fasting with intention, confessing sincerely, receiving the Eucharist with a hunger for God. No magic formulas, no shortcuts. This may seem too simple for those who enjoy spectacular narratives, but it is precisely in the humility of means that life begins to take on a different form. This is what fascinates me, the way a set of discrete practices gradually produces a robust transformation. When the mind relearns to inhabit the now, when routine acquires rhythm, the person changes the way they react to pressures, adjusts the tone of their words, and better filters what enters through their eyes and ears. Where there was once reactivity, choices arise. Where there was raw anxiety, vigilance arises. These are micro-decisions, and it is in the sum of them that personal history finds a new direction. But prudence also means knowing that not all brilliance comes from above. This is why spiritual tradition speaks of signs that bring stable peace, humility, concrete charity, and obedience not as barriers, but as criteria. If a supposed calling generates continuous confusion, inflated vanity, and a fascination with secrets for the sheer pleasure of it, something is out of whack. This is where the figure of Mary as morning star illuminates the map again. She points to Christ, not to herself, to the gospel, not to the spectacle. Attention to Medjugorje seen through this prism is not a detour, but a pedagogical reinforcement that reminds us of the direction. Instead of collecting new things, one learns to persist in what bears good fruit. This is the kind of maturation that alters mindsets, reduces noise, and paves the way for clear listening. There are, of course, those who seek dates, timelines, the exact timeline of final events, as if faith could be tamed by an agenda. However, the most solid testimonies aren't bound by this. They speak of people who have reclaimed the capacity to love, forgive, and serve. People who have reorganized their homes, redefined priorities, and reinterpreted old wounds in the light of real mercy. This is what has a concrete impact. And it's curious how the discipline of fasting, praying, and reconciling generates clarity for decisions that seem in no way mystical at first glance. Asking a child for forgiveness, ending a toxic relationship, giving up an addiction, choosing a job with less status and more meaning, guarding one's tongue so as not to hurt, protecting one's mind from excessive screen time. In this subtle scene, revelations cease to be a distant spectacle and become living commitments. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we think of prudence and respect, we run the risk of interpreting them as brakes that prevent the soul from igniting truth. They are controlled fuels, preventing the fire from devouring the house. Prudence is what keeps the flame burning just right, without being extinguished by the first wind, without setting fire to what should remain intact. Respect is what preserves communion, the bond with the Church, the unity that prevents spiritual experiences from becoming islands without a bridge. This combination is what allows the journey to advance without losing its delicacy. And, as the journey advances, the signs become clearer. The heart becomes less eager for instant answers and more willing to walk as the light offers itself in a daily dose. This is where the language of heaven meets ordinary life. Those who go through such processes learn a rhythm, to embrace the day as it comes, to make room for silence without shirking responsibilities, to do the good that is within reach, to offer small sacrifices for concrete intentions. Little by little, we grow from within, and this growth is strange to those observing from the outside, because it lacks the noise of triumph. It has the sound of fidelity. It has the joy that doesn't shout, the strength that doesn't impose, the firmness that doesn't harden. The hidden truth, in the end, lies not in satisfied curiosity, but in maturing love, and this makes a person predictable in the best sense, stable in goodness, even when the world spins fast. If you think of Medjugorje and only imagine lines of pilgrims and extraordinary stories, it's worth looking at it from another angle, like a mirror that reflects simple questions. What, in my routine, needs light? What choices take me away from the essential? What habits undermine my vigilance? The fascinating thing is that, as these questions become sincere, the horizon clears. not because everything is magically resolved, but because the inner compass points north again, and when the inner compass aligns, one becomes less hostage to opinions, less seduced by noise, and more open to love. It's the inner transformation that gives stability to emotions and maturity. 2 decisions. It's the transformation that doesn't appear in the news, but changes destinies. Therefore, prudence does not diminish the beauty of the mystery. It enhances it. It's like polishing a lens before contemplating the stars. If there's too much dust, the light distorts. If the lens is clean, what was always there reveals itself clearly. In this sense, Medjugorje in 30 seconds boils down to an invitation to walk with an open heart, to walk with your feet on the ground, to embrace what makes love grow, and to set aside what fuels sterile concerns. Between an honest devotional experience and a serious examination of the fruits, a balance is born that honors God and protects the person. And, as we walk in this way, the morning star remains firm on the horizon, indicating a safe direction in the midst of the night. He comments, "That makes sense to me. There's something intriguing when we think about the 7 unrevealed messages. The silence surrounding them isn't a void, it's a method. It's as if heaven, by temporarily hiding their content, is showing us behind the scenes of the human heart, revealing that preparation comes before words. What does heaven want to form in us before the revelations?" The question echoes like a signal in the dawn, because, deep down, what transforms a life isn't just the news that arrives, but the mindset with which we receive it. Have you ever noticed how 2 people can hear the same sentence and yet make completely different decisions? One listens eagerly and gets up, the other listens in a hurry and disperses. The waiting period, then, becomes a delicate school where we learn to tidy up our inner house so that, when the hidden truth knocks on the door, it finds space to stay. Perhaps that's why silence, sometimes uncomfortable, has such a profound impact. It removes us from the noise and restores our ability to perceive the essential. Between one day and the next, without fireworks, character is honed. Patience matures. Vigilance sharpens the senses. Hope ceases to be a slogan and becomes a muscle that sustains. And when hope takes shape, the journey ceases to be a race for answers and becomes a path of fidelity. You can feel something rearranging within. The anxiety that once called for shortcuts loses strength. Impulses, which demanded decisions in the heat of the moment, give way to more conscious choices. It's almost like training an ear to recognize a specific melody amidst many voices. With each day of silence well lived, the spiritual ear recognizes God's timbre more clearly. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's not just about enduring the wait, but about letting the wait rewrite us from within. There's a pedagogy from heaven in this interval. Small gestures that seem banal, but shift the axis of the heart. A request for forgiveness that you've been putting off, a careful use of words, a greater attention to what enters your eyes, a discreet offering of time to those in need. While the content of the messages remains veiled, the already active message is this: convert yourself into the rhythm of everyday life. The silence between revelations is not a dark corridor. It's the studio where the potter's hand works without spotlights, and this transformation, made behind the scenes, is what makes us able to receive, without distortion. Because a misaligned heart transforms even good into noise. An aligned heart gathers even a whisper and recognizes it as direction. There's also a lesson to be learned about identity. If we chase news like those who collect news, we need to reorient our compass. The 7 unrevealed messages aren't a riddle to fuel curiosity, but rather a mirror that asks, who are you becoming while you wait? When this question pierces the layer of custom, the courage to examine habits, adjust priorities, and simplify choices grows. It's time to allow faith to do what it has always promised: reorganize chaos, heal fissures, and reduce spaces for self. The hidden truth, before manifesting itself in words, is already at work in the way we treat people, in the way we manage our own weaknesses, in the constancy with which we return to the essential. Ultimately, great shifts arise from discrete movements, and it's this kind of shift, subterranean yet solid, that sustains any content when it comes to light. Think about the times you've waited for something important. Typically, we fixate on the final announcement. We forget that what enables us to welcome the announcement is the quality of the journey. Heaven seems to insist on this, training our gaze toward the light that has already been lit, rather than lamenting the one that hasn't yet shone. It's a shift in mindset with practical effects. Instead of wasting energy on predictions, we learn to invest energy in fidelity. Instead of counting hours, we count acts of love. Instead of watching the window, waiting for a visitor, we tidy the room. And suddenly, our hearts realize that waiting wasn't a waste of time, but rather, a gain, in depth. It's curious how, in this process, we become freer, less reactive to the buzz of social media, less hostage to instant opinions, more focused on the axis that doesn't change. When someone asks, but why doesn't God speak soon? There's a kindness in this delay that, at first, we don't understand. If the words arrived unprepared, they might be lost like rain on a slippery roof. Delay builds new tiles. It prepares the earth, loosens old clods, and creates roots, and deep roots respond to strong winds. At this point, it's worth noticing the beauty of the discrete signs that are already within reach. A passage in Scripture that leaps out at us, a simple piece of advice that burns with goodness within, a piece that doesn't fit with the circumstances. They are invisible nails that hold the structure of the house together. When the structure is firm, revelation. When it arrives, we'll find shelter. There's also an aspect of responsibility. The silence of the 7 messages becomes a call to maturity, not to live from third-hand experience, but to cultivate a personal experience of God. Those who approach with this attitude begin to better filter what they consume, to protect their minds from overload, to choose the quality of what nourishes the soul. Discernment flourishes as a fruit of a well-chosen routine. What was once curiosity about behind-the-scenes events becomes a commitment to coherence. The result? A kind of serenity that doesn't depend on the weather, a clarity that doesn't require adornments, a gentle strength that sustains when the road gets tough. And this serenity has a direct impact on relationships. It improves listening, lessens the harshness of judgments, and increases the delicacy of care. Sometimes, the greatest revelation is this: loving on a daily basis is more miraculous than it seems. At this point, you realize that waiting isn't about standing still. It's an art. It's about learning to read weak signals, like someone learning to see in the dark. It's about understanding that vigilance isn't nervousness, but focus. That conversion isn't guilt, it's freedom. That hope isn't escape, it's muscle. And that Mary, the morning star, in this context, isn't an amulet of answers, it's a route map. The map doesn't walk for you, but it keeps you from getting lost. And that changes everything. Instead of living tensely over what you don't know, you become faithful to what you already know. And what we already know is enough for an honest new beginning. Praying truthfully, fasting meaningfully, reconciling without procrastinating, serving without an audience. This is how the heart grows big enough to accommodate whatever comes. When I think of the 7 messages, I like to imagine a notebook with blank pages, kept high. The notebook exists, but it's not within reach right now. Meanwhile, God gives us another tool, a sharp pencil and the pages of the present. What are you writing on them? Every gesture of kindness, every sacrifice, every carefully chosen word, are lines that train your hand to write firmly when it's time to copy from the notebook above. It's not romantic, it's concrete, and concrete is what remains when enthusiasm fades. Life itself, little by little, becomes legible. You begin to recognize patterns of grace, to notice where you stumble, to celebrate small victories. And, in this reading, you discover that waiting is not a dead-end tunnel. It's a corridor that leads to an open courtyard. Some say all this is not enough, that the soul craves fireworks, but the fire that truly warms is the one in the hearth that remains. It is there that good conversations happen, that wounds heal without fanfare, that grand visions translate into possible gestures. If the messages are stored, the warmth that precedes them can already be felt. And those who learn to recognize this warmth are not mistaken when the door opens, because you will have already been trained to love truth more than novelty, to prefer consistency to spectacle, to choose depth over noise. This is the kind of foundation that protects against winds and fads, and that allows any revelation to produce stable fruits rather than fleeting euphoria. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this waiting is discovering that God trusts you enough to educate you little by little. He knows that solid processes require time, and that too much haste robs them of flavor. By honoring this time, the soul gains breath. It loses its fear of silence, rediscovers its own voice, and becomes more human. And when we become more human, we grow closer to the divine, paradoxical and true. The ground of ordinary life becomes a sanctuary. The everyday, a territory of discrete miracles. And, in the simplest way, the heart whispers, I am ready to listen when the time comes, but I am also ready to obey with what I have already heard. It is from this place that true freedom springs. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If there is a door through which light enters first, it has the simple and demanding name of purity of heart. It is not perfectionism, nor naivete that closes one's eyes to reality. It is transparency in intentions, honesty in desires, integrity in choices. When the heart is clouded, even good advice arrives distorted. When it is clean, even a whisper becomes guidance. Purity is not a showcase to appear holy. It is a living laboratory where motivation is purified before action. It is behind the scenes that everything is decided. Why do I do what I do? For whom do I do it? What do I expect in return? The answer to these questions defines the quality of our journey and the silent impact we leave along the way. Understanding one's own motivations is like adjusting a camera lens before photographing a starry sky. If the lens is smudged, no landscape will be clear. In terms of practical spirituality, purity of heart means moving by love, not vanity. By truth, not convenience. By fidelity, not fear. This mindset changes the way we deal with praise, criticism, applause, and silence. When the intention is right, the result doesn't steal our peace. When the intention is crooked, even success tastes like sand. It's a hidden truth that reveals itself as we are willing to look squarely at what moves us. The first step is simple and revolutionary. Stop for 5 minutes and examine your conscience. 5 minutes may seem short, but the right amount of time to rejuvenate your soul is the time you truly sustain. Sit down, breathe, recapture the day that has passed, and identify a moment when your decision was guided by love, and another when it was guided by pride, need, or haste. It doesn't need fancy speech, it needs sincerity. Naming the shadow isn't about remaining trapped by it. It's about taking away its power to operate hidden in this small mirror. Much is reorganized. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because purity of heart is not only a filter, it is also a fire that burns away what darkens our vision. There are habits that seem harmless but cloud the soul. The automatic comparison that devalues what you have. The consumption of content that ignites empty desires. The toxic curiosity about other people's lives. The complaining that becomes the soundtrack of the day. Cutting these threads is not moralism, it is inner hygiene. Think of a house with windows always closed. The air becomes heavy. Opening the windows is a bit difficult at first, but breathing returns. It is in this ventilation that God's presence ceases to be theory and becomes oxygen. Purity has a beautiful side effect: freedom. When intentions are purified, one becomes less controlled by praise, less crushed by rejection, less held hostage by the need to impress. Decisions gain substance because they don't need to prove anything to anyone. The right gesture, made for the right reason, stands firm, even when no one sees it. This freedom reduces inner noise, organizes priorities, and restores authority to words, which cease to be foam and become rock. It's a silent transformation, but one that's noticeable in the tone of voice, the look in one's eyes, the quality of one's presence. In everyday life, purity of heart also has to do with how you handle the little things. Buying unnecessary things, to fill a void, prolonging conversations that fuel gossip, insisting on humiliating jokes, giving in to excessive screen time when your body needs rest, postponing apologies that could heal relationships. All of this creates a subtle fog. It's not about living with guilt, but about cultivating loving attention. A pure heart is not a nervous inspector, it's a patient gardener. It pulls weeds without destroying the bed, waters seeds without flooding, waits for the right time for them to bloom. It's a way of treating one's own fragility with truth and delicacy at the same time. To anchor this path to the ground, I propose this day's task. Set aside 5 minutes for an examination of conscience and choose a concrete gesture of renunciation. It's not a grand promise or a spectacle. It's something specific, measurable, and achievable. Perhaps cutting out the sweet treat that has become an automatic refuge today. Perhaps turning off notifications for a few hours to regain focus. Perhaps removing from your vocabulary that hurts for fun. Perhaps offering time to listen to those you normally avoid. Renunciation, when born of love, opens space for a greater presence. And this space is where grace works. The heart feels it immediately. Lightness comes not from the absence of struggles, but from the coherence between what one believes and what one does. The curious thing is that the more you practice these 5 minutes with a small sacrifice, the more you awaken a refined sense of direction. Spiritual sensitivity grows like someone learning a new language. At first, just single words, then phrases, later, entire conversations. God's revelations rarely arrive with fireworks. They arrive as understanding that fits, peace that endures, courage that arises without fanfare. Purity of heart prepares the ground for recognizing this language. That's why, before seeking grand answers, it makes sense to tend to the foundation. The edifice of life cannot rest on the shifting sands of confused intentions. There is also a release of expectations. Purity doesn't promise an absence of failures. It promises a quick restart. When the intention is right, mistakes don't define identity, they merely teach. One learns to ask for forgiveness without pretense, to correct course without pride, to start over without self-hatred. This changes the mindset with which one navigates storms. A pure heart doesn't live on the hunt for external culprits. It prefers to look at its own field and uproot what gets in the way. This gives firmness, and firmness has a direct impact on peace. Those at peace don't lose their tenderness, but they also don't compromise on what's essential. Perhaps you notice an internal resistance. What if I fail in this act of renunciation? Resistance is normal, and it reveals the need for humility. It's not about collecting victories to be proud of. It's about training your love to serve with greater freedom. Instead of looking at failure harshly, look at it with responsibility and tenderness. Adjust your gesture. Start over today. Choose a smaller renunciation if necessary, but don't give up on the practice. Consistency, not intensity, gets the job done. God writes with firm lines on those who allow themselves to be polished, and the polishing happens millimeter by millimeter. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the call to purity of heart isn't just about avoiding evil. It's about choosing good with enthusiasm. There's an act of positivity in this proposal. Fill your eyes with true beauty. Occupy your hands with service. Commit your mouth to blessing. Commit your time to priorities that nourish the soul. When good occupies, evil loses ground. It's not an abstract struggle. It's an inner engineering process. You rearrange furniture, open up space for light, clean corners, and suddenly you realize the entire environment has changed its temperature. The house is the same, but the atmosphere is different. In this climate, what heaven wants to form in us before the revelations takes concrete shape, a heart capable of welcoming without distortion, a heart that loves truth more than novelty, a heart that doesn't need an audience to do what's right, a heart that doesn't confuse intensity with depth. It's this quality of presence that transforms relationships. In family, at work, in life's fleeting encounters, a person becomes remembered not only for what they say, but for what they convey. And what is conveyed, when the heart is pure, is a rare blend of firmness and sweetness. For today, let this image stay with you. The open window. At dawn, it's simple, silent, and inevitably luminous. Purity of heart is opening this window every day, even when the urge is to pull back the curtain and go back to sleep. Open it, breathe, look, give thanks. Adjust what needs to be adjusted. Let go of what needs to be left behind. If you fall, get up. If you get tired, rest without giving up. Learning this rhythm is building a safe path from within, and safe paths lead us to true destinations. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Vigilance isn't living tensely, it's living awake. It's like adjusting the focus of a lens that, through carelessness, has become unbalanced. Suddenly, what seemed like a jumble of lights becomes organized into clear contours. Spiritual awakening has this effect. You begin to realize where you waste energy, where you feed on noise, where you outsource your own attention. And when your attention returns to the right place, decisions take on specific weight, they cease to be impulsive reactions and become choices aligned with what truly matters. Inner sobriety arises from this, from a peace that isn't apathy, but total presence, from a silence that isn't emptiness, but space for a voice that doesn't shout, just whispers at just the right moment. Perhaps you recognize yourself in the portrait of someone who wakes up and, before taking a deep breath, has already opened the door to a barrage of notifications. The body has barely emerged from sleep and the soul is already on alert. Messages demanding a response, timelines that provoke comparisons, news that heightens anxiety. It's a kind of ultra-processed food for the mind fast, colorful, addictive, but lacking in substance. Vigilance, in these times, is a counterintuitive act, closing windows to open up clarity, saying no to constant stimuli so you can hear the hidden truth that needs silence to emerge. Those who monitor their own attention begin to regain autonomy. They choose when to expose themselves. Filter what enters. Prioritize what generates peace that endures. Inner sobriety is anything but sullen. It is elegant in the way it manages emotions and thoughts. Instead of getting caught up in the carousel of comparison, it asks, what does this change in my fidelity today? Instead of spinning through the maze of opinions, it returns to the simple axis of the good that can be done. This mindset alters the background of routine, the way we work, listen, and rest. Vigilant people don't live in fear. They live attentively. They feel when their heart races faster than it should. They notice when curiosity becomes intrusive. They notice when humor wants to overwhelm the truth. And, in this loving attention, they make micro-corrections. They reduce the volume of the world, amplify their inner listening. That's why the proposal of a 1-hour digital fast per day has such a tangible impact. An hour may seem short, but it's a real breather, a decision not to feed the mind with continuous stimuli. The logic is simple. Turn off notifications. Put the device out of reach. Choose a fixed time that becomes a ritual. At first, restlessness appears as withdrawal. The hand reaches for the screen reflexively. Persist. This hour isn't a whim. It's a sacred space for God's whisper. You can fill it with nourishing reading, with a brief and sincere prayer, with a walk that restores oxygen, with a notebook where you write down what you notice and what needs to be adjusted. In a few days, the mind regains elasticity and the heart regains depth. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because vigilance and sobriety aren't abstract goals. They're technologies of the spirit for getting through noisy days. Think in terms of inner engineering. Every system needs clear boundaries to function well. Without boundaries, everything leaks. With fair boundaries, everything flows. Surveillance draws these boundaries with a firm pencil. Times to look at. Screens. Times to be silent. Spaces in the house where cell phones are not allowed. Conversations that don't cross the boundaries of dignity. Content that, however popular, doesn't nourish who you want to be. And, like all engineering, this is perfected through testing and adjustment. It's not radicalism. It's the method of those who care for what they love. There's an immediate gain in freedom when you realize you don't need to be available to everyone all the time. Constant availability isn't love, it's distraction. Love is a full presence in the now, not a fragmented presence in 1,000 open tabs. Those who practice digital fasting begin to notice that anxiety drops a few decibels, that creativity has more space, that prayer finds a comfortable temperature. The practical consequence is direct. Decisions are no longer made on impulse and are filtered by peace and purpose. It's curious how, by removing an hour of noise, you gain entire hours of quality. The day seems to yield, not by magic, but by focus. Inner sobriety also teaches us to observe the triggers that hijack our attention. There are profiles that spark envy, news that instills chronic fear, discussions that inflame the ego and deplete charity. Vigilance means anticipating the hijacking, deactivating, silencing, excluding. And by doing so, you're not alienating yourself, you're choosing a mental diet. Those who care for their bodies understand the logic of nourishing themselves well and avoiding excess. The same applies to the soul. A well-nourished mind responds better to the day's provocations, maintains tenderness in difficult conversations, and resists narratives that incite panic or arrogance. Digital temperance opens space for calm revelation, that understanding that arrives without fanfare but shifts the axis. Behind the scenes of attention, vigilance works with two instruments: lucidity and kindness. Lucidity to name what steals focus, kindness to start over without a whip. Just because you failed today doesn't mean all your effort has crumbled. A humble restart has a pedagogical effect. It teaches the will that it doesn't rule alone. Little by little, the inner house gains order. And, with the house in order, ordinary life becomes less reactive. You listen more, speak less, observe better. And when you speak, it's not to fill the silence, it's to add value. This sobriety confers authority without being authoritarian. People sense the difference. There's solidity in your words, coherence in your gestures, serenity in your gaze. It's important to remember that vigilance is not paranoia. Paranoia sees threats everywhere. Vigilance sees opportunities to love more. Precisely, paranoia hardens. Vigilance makes the heart more flexible to perceive what is alive and needs care. Awakening spiritually is taking ownership of this fine-tuning. The environment remains noisy, but within, a rhythm is established. Attention, pause, decision, and in this rhythm, the person recognizes discrete signs that previously went unnoticed. A thought that needs reconsideration, a desire that doesn't align with the purpose, a reaction that can be replaced by a better gesture. Everyday life becomes a training ground and the accumulated training becomes a lifestyle. When this practice meets prayer, a more honest dialogue emerges. It's not about bringing a perfect report to God, but about presenting the raw truth of the day, where I was faithful, where I strayed, where I overdid it, where I failed. Inner sobriety doesn't dramatize failures, but it doesn't normalize them. It confronts them with light, not with self-accusation, and light has a very unique way of working. It reveals to heal, not to expose. You emerge from these encounters with disarming clarity, with the gentle courage to adjust course. There are revelations that arrive this way. Through decantation, a new understanding of a relationship, an insight to resolve a conflict, a concrete step toward organizing finances, time, and priorities. The spiritual and the practical cease to be rivals. They become allies. If you want a simple way to start, choose the same time every day for your digital fast. It could be when you wake up, so the day dawns without intrusion. It could be before bed, so the night rests without excessive light. Use part of this time to breathe consciously, read something nourishing, and jot down what you've noticed. Keep an anchor phrase to return to when your mind wanders. My heart is yours. Teach me to listen. Give me sobriety. Short, easy to remember phrases act as rails in moments of distraction. In a few days you'll notice a transformation within. Less noise, more consistency, more space for a presence that doesn't force the door, just knocks gently. This discipline, combined with the call to purity of heart, creates a resilient architecture. Purity gives transparency to intentions. Vigilance protects borders. Sobriety organizes interiors. The result is not a sterile life, but a life with lights on in the right rooms. What was once chronic anxiety begins to lose ground. What was once diffuse guilt translates into concrete responsibility. What was once haste becomes readiness. And readiness is a posture that welcomes what comes without falling apart. When the soul reaches this state, the journey takes on a different texture. What heaven wants to form in us before the grand words are spoken is already being formed here. Presence, focus, fidelity. Gradually, this practice even changes the way you consume good spiritual news. Instead of chasing the extraordinary, you recognize the beauty of the ordinary. Lived well. Instead of waiting for a bolt from the blue, you learn to read the discrete signs of providence. Instead of getting lost in predictions, you find yourself in the patient work of the day. It's no less faith. It's a more muscular faith, one that bears weight, that endures seasons, that knows how to wait without becoming paralyzed. And when something greater comes, you will be neither empty of self nor full of self. You will be available with free hands and an attentive heart. This is the atmosphere in which true messages would find shelter. An awakened, sober interior, free from invisible constraints, capable of accepting with discernment and transforming it into concrete action. From here, it becomes clearer why vigilance doesn't steal joy. It deepens it. It doesn't stifle laughter. It adjusts the volume. It doesn't dull the sparkle. It gives direction. And, in this balance, God's whisper doesn't compete with the world's sirens. It asserts itself through consistency. Comment: this makes sense to me. Prayer and fasting are not just ancient practices embedded in pious calendars. Together, they form a discreet and powerful armor. Prayer is the breath that keeps the soul aware of its sustainer. Fasting is the discipline that restores the body to its place as servant, not master. When these two embrace, our mindset changes. We don't react to the world with impulses, but with decisions guided by a center that never wavers. It's curious how, by praying truthfully and fasting purposefully, small areas of shadow that seemed part of our identity begin to lose strength. What was an automatic habit becomes a choice. What was a compulsion becomes a terrain of freedom. The hidden truth is that, often, words of faith aren't lacking. What's missing is the muscle that sustains them. Prayer and fasting build this silent muscle. The image of armor helps us understand the impact. Prayer is like the armor on our chest. It protects our heart from discouragement, comparison, and resentment that tries to reverberate within like an infinite echo. Fasting, in turn, functions like the shield on our arm. It intercepts arrows that arrive via appetite and excess, reminding us that nothing that governs from without should override the light that burns within. When our routine is organized in this way, the journey gains a firmness that has nothing to do with harshness, but with coherence. You continue to feel. You remain human, but you are no longer governed by waves that once swept you along without. Asking permission. Daily prayer, humble and constant, aligns the soul. It doesn't need to be long to be profound. It needs to be sincere. Sometimes it's a phrase repeated in rhythm with your breath. Sometimes a psalm that visits your memory. Sometimes a silence offered with love. What matters is the truth you carry, not the performance you put on. This truth, spoken before God, begins to reorganize the backstage. Thoughts gain clarity. Affections are given a name. Wounds demand care without spectacle. Prayer illuminates the internal topography so you can see where you stand, and this clear vision prepares the ground for fasting to act with precision. Fasting, in turn, is a concrete decision to empty a space so that another can be filled. The thing is, the emptiness hurts a little not because it's evil, but because it reveals hidden dependencies. By choosing a small renunciation, you touch invisible threads. You notice the rush with which you turn to food to numb tension. Notice the reflex to open networks when loneliness throbs. Catch the ease of complaining when frustration weighs on you. Fasting isn't punitive, it's pedagogical. It exposes the root so that grace can heal, not shame. And when the root is touched, what seemed untamable begins to calm, as if someone adjusted the volume on a stereo that was too loud. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the effectiveness of this armor lies not in sporadic intensity, but in humble constancy. There's an ancient wisdom in choosing 2 days of the week for a small offering, Wednesday and Friday. We're not talking about feats that push our limits. We're talking about tailored, achievable gestures that prove in the body what the heart believes. It could be cutting back on a food you often use as an escape. It could be an hour less of energy draining media. It could be silencing the complaint that has become your soundtrack. The secret is to offer it for someone concrete, a friend in struggle, a family member in need of peace, a cause that calls for support. When fasting becomes love in action, it doesn't become a cult of self-effort, it becomes intercession. Notice how this changes the dynamics of the week. When you wake up on Wednesday, you already know. Today, a small sacrifice will be your act of love for someone. When Friday arrives, you repeat the gesture and honestly observe what it moved within you. Did anxiety diminish? Did patience appear? Where it had none, was a harsh word avoided. Programmed repetition creates pathways, and pathways don't restrict, they guide. They free creative energy because they conserve the strength that was previously lost in endless internal negotiations. Instead of each day being a battleground of to do or not to do, you already have pre-established decisions that guide the route. The most beautiful thing is how prayer and fasting nourish each other. Prayer reveals where fasting needs to work. Fasting deepens prayer by creating silence within. It's as if two hands work together to sculpt the same piece. When a gesture of renunciation triggers impatience, prayer welcomes, calms, and rectifies. When prayer points to attachment, fasting enters like a key that unlocks the door. Little by little, simple and powerful revelations emerge. You realize you could live with less and be freer. That a gluttony for information is not a thirst for truth. That biting humor is not courage. That constant criticism is not lucidity. These discoveries gradually clear the battlefields where you were fighting in vain. Perhaps you fear falling into moralism or self-punishment. This risk exists when we lose sight of the reason. Therefore, I repeat, fasting is love that learns to say no to itself in order to say yes to someone. Wisely chosen renunciation doesn't make you watch the clock, waiting for the time to fulfill the schedule. It restores dignity to time. You notice hunger emerging and, instead of dramatizing it, transform it into prayer. Lord, may my hunger today visit the one I offered. You feel the urge to open social media and, instead of giving in, you offer absence as a space to listen. Speak, for your servant is listening. You hold the complaint at bay and choose to bless. May I be a bridge and not a burden. It is thus, in microgestures, that the armor closes over vulnerable points. On a mental level, the double fasting prayer corrects illusions. It teaches that freedom isn't about doing everything. It's about not doing what enslaves me. It teaches that strength isn't about explosion. It's about consistency. It teaches that maturity isn't about hardness. It's about docility to a greater good. This re-education affects the way you work, love, rest, manage money, and deal with mistakes. Before long, you'll notice that difficult decisions become a little less nebulous. Not because life has become easy, but because you've gained a ruler. And this ruler measures what brings you closer to the light and what moves you away from it. There's also a communal effect. When you offer your Wednesday and Friday for someone, their life begins to live within your rhythms. You pray with more empathy, observe concrete opportunities to help, and value signs of hope. Prayer and fasting become a bridge, and, as you cross, you discover something decisive. An expanded heart serves without needing to be seen. This expansion is real transformation, the kind that doesn't make headlines but builds destinies. The impact of this on your inner world is silent and profound. You become less self-centered, more attentive to what heals. And what heals, almost always, is the combination of firmness and tenderness. If for a moment, guilt overwhelms you for not having started sooner, let the truth counterpoint. It doesn't matter where you come from. It matters where you're going. Start small. Start today. Quietly, if the sacrifice you chose was too big, adjust it. If it was too small, refine it. The only wrong measure is the one that prevents you from staying. Remember, the power of armor lies in continuity, not in the heroism of an isolated day. The hero of one day may end up hostage to his own deed. The faithful of many days builds a peace that endures. Over time, the dual prayer fasting process forms a force field around your attention, and you begin to inhabit everyday life with a different kind of presence. Haste loses its glamour. Comparison loses its volume. Reactivity loses its stage. It's a silent change, but those around you notice. Your words now carry more weight. Your listening is warmer, your gaze more merciful, and when temptations return, because they always do, you recognize them from afar, like spotting the footprints of an old thief. Armor doesn't impede the battle. It increases your chances of getting through without getting lost. All of this makes room for something even more delicate, a heart open to small inspirations. Simple ideas emerge with clarity, calling someone, organizing that bill, offering lunch, writing a letter, wrapping up a pending matter. The extraordinary begins to visit the ordinary without fanfare. You find yourself at peace in situations that previously set off alarm bells. It is in this climate that faith ceases to be theory and becomes atmosphere. Life, without changing its scenery, changes its meaning. And when life gains meaning, any sacrifice becomes possible, because it's not about giving up joy, but investing in joy that lasts. If this proposal resonates with you, try this simple and firm approach. Every Wednesday and Friday, a small sacrifice offered by someone. Pray for this person concretely. Say their name, ask for what you need, and give thanks for signs. Observe what happens in your week, write it down in your notebook, and notice the subtle shifts of your heart. The armor adjusts to your body with use, and each use increases your confidence. Without fanfare, but with purpose. Without exhibitionism, but with intimate revelations that reshape perspectives. Let this image accompany your next steps. A traveler adjusting his belt and raising his shield before setting off. He knows the journey includes rocks and wind, but he also knows he is protected. And protection isn't about escaping the world. It's about loving the world without being swallowed by it. Prayer and fasting refine this love, shape it, and restore its flavor. In the rhythm of these days, the soul learns to walk on rough terrain with the lightness of someone who knows where they're going and with whom. He comments, "That makes sense to me." There are wounds that don't bleed on the outside, but continue to throb in the same place, as if the whole body were breathing around a lump in the throat. Sometimes we get so used to this tightness that we begin to confuse pain with identity. I am like this because of that. But the hidden truth is that no wound deserves to govern our history. Reconciliation doesn't begin externally. It begins in the most intimate place where memory and will meet. It is there that decisions acquire a taste of freedom. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It isn't giving reasons for a mistake. It isn't returning to the place that hurt. Forgiving is preventing evil from having the final say in who you are becoming. It's taking a key from the hand of the past and placing it in the present, where transformation can finally happen. When we talk about healing wounds, resistance arises. But what they did was serious. If I let them go, they'll think it was cheap. What if it happens again? A sober heart doesn't deny these questions. It welcomes them one by one and returns them to their proper dimensions. Forgiveness doesn't eliminate the need for justice nor erase healthy boundaries. Forgiveness repositions the heart so that justice doesn't become revenge and boundaries don't become a wall of ice. The difference in mindset is decisive. Instead of reacting to the past, you begin to act from an axis that aligns with good. And when the axis shifts, the impact spreads. There's a lightness that arrives discreetly but truly. Memory loses its venom. The inner voice becomes less harsh. The night gains a new silence. Sometimes, the wound is like a song played softly all day long. You don't even realize it's playing, but your actions dance to its beat. Impatience with those who aren't to blame. The rush to defend yourself before listening. The irony that wounds, the rigidity that freezes reconciliation is changing the soundtrack. It doesn't happen by decree, it happens through practice. And we practice with simple acts that challenge the automatic script of resentment. Take a sheet of paper, write the name of the person you need to forgive, and look at that name with the honesty of someone who knows the pain they felt. Then, choose a first step that's consistent with your reality. A short message that says, "I forgive you." A phone call that paves the way for a conversation. Or, if distance is necessary, a meaningful and thoughtful prayer, asking for good to reach that person. Simple doesn't equal superficial. Simple is direct, without frills, with truth. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the heart finds many ways to keep the wound alive without realizing it. One of them is justifying repetition. We tell the same story to ourselves and others, reinforcing the role that gives us reason and prevents us from moving even an inch toward peace. This mechanism has a touch of anesthesia. It the conscience with the feeling that we are protected, when in fact we are standing still. Forgiveness, on the contrary, is movement. It is choosing to lose a right to retaliate to gain a greater right, the right to live lightly. It is exchanging the sour satisfaction of being right for a gentle joy that doesn't need to defeat anyone to exist. And this shift in mindset is a revelation that arrives behind the scenes. When we do what seems small, stop repeating the complaint, silence an irony that fed us, sincerely wish well for the one who hurt us. There's a helpful question. Who do I become when I feed this memory? This question isn't spectacle, but it's powerful. It reveals the kind of person who emerges from within you when pain takes over. From there, decisions gain clarity. You can choose not to answer calls that unsettle you. You can stay away from environments that normalize disrespect. You can seek professional help when the burden is too great. Forgiving isn't exposing yourself to the same danger. It's aligning with goodness and, from that place, building boundaries that protect your dignity. Healing wounds is a journey with a map. Small truths, repeated with courage, that gradually disarm the minefield within. Forgiving isn't about wanting to hug someone who hurt you. Often, the urge doesn't come, and that's okay. Forgiving is deciding to do good despite the urge. That's why writing a name and offering a concrete gesture has such spiritual value. You tell your heart who's in charge, and the heart learns like someone learning a new language. At first, it sounds strange. Over time, it becomes fluent. There's an emotional re-education that rebuilds trust first, trust in God, then trust in oneself. Finally, trust in the right relationships. The wound doesn't magically disappear, but it shifts. It ceases to be the center and becomes a memory permeated by mercy. When forgiveness begins to take hold, something delicate happens. You regain the right to name the pain without drowning. In it, you can tell the story without needing to paint the other person in the darkest colors. You can look at your own flaws without crumbling. This sobriety has an immediate impact on everyday life. You stop returning in kind, abandon the web of indirectness, and stop measuring love with a yardstick of scarcity. Mercy, that seemingly distant verb, becomes practical. A softer tone of voice, a disarming response, a silence that prevents a fire, an initiative to help that surprises even you. It is through this practice that the heart heals from within. Perhaps, there's a situation where external reconciliation isn't safe or possible right now. In these cases, forgiveness doesn't depend on a face-to-face encounter. It depends on the decision to let go of the cord within. You can pray for that person's well-being without reopening toxic relationships. You can wish for their healing from whatever hurt you on. This is a sophisticated prayer, because it recognizes that the harm that has hurt you also sickens the one who inflicted it. When you pray like this, you broaden your own soul, and a broad soul breathes better, discerns better, loves better. The world, on the outside, may remain the same. On the inside, you shift gears. There are wounds that feel like tattoos. We think we'll carry them forever with the same clarity. Mercy, however, is a patient solvent. It doesn't erase history, but it does erase the acid that corrodes. One day, you realize that memory no longer triggers the same alarms, that your internal muscles don't contract the same way, that the present is no longer hostage to an old scene. This is the sign that healing has begun to replace the trauma. The body registers this peace. So does the mind. And in this state, God's revelations arrive as a clarity that doesn't blind, but warms. If the fear of appearing weak paralyzes you, it's worth remembering. Weakness isn't forgiving. Weakness is continuing to be ruled by those who hurt you. True. Strength is choosing a good that doesn't depend on others. Strength is saying enough to the cycle that repeats pain. Strength is maintaining boundaries without hatred, protecting your own inner home without raising war flags. This strength is gentle but firm, and it inspires those around you. Family notices. Friends notice. Even difficult environments begin to treat you differently because your presence changes the atmosphere. Not by imposition, but by consistency. 2. Make the first step concrete. I suggest a small ritual of honesty in the early evening. Find a quiet corner. Breathe. Write the name of the person you need to forgive. Say quietly what hurt you, and then utter a simple phrase. I release you from my judgment and ask that good come to you. If possible and prudent, send a short message. Without irony, simply opening a door of peace. If not, stick with prayer and repeat for a few days, not to force a feeling, but to practice commitment. The heart, when trained with a small amount of fidelity, responds. And when it responds, you feel a real shift. The same scenes of the day take on new colors. The same people seem less threatening. The same life becomes more livable. This choice has surprising side effects. Sleep improves, skin relaxes, laughter returns more easily, words lose their harshness, eyes regain their sparkle, the world within becomes wider, and at the edges of this space, intuitions of a path are born, a necessary conversation that once seemed impossible, an apology you've been putting off for months, a gesture of reparation that doesn't humiliate anyone. This is transformation in progress. Not a noisy renovation, but a restoration crafted by the hands of a craftsman. God works in the details. And when the details align, the whole picture takes on meaning. If at any point you feel tired and think, I can't do it, remember that forgiveness isn't a single flight of stairs. It's a ramp. Sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's okay. What you can't do is dwell on the setback. Start small, but start again. Trust the rhythm. What is repeated with love matures. And maturing here means gaining depth to love without naivete or bitterness. It is maturity that bridges the gap between justice and mercy, between truth and peace, between limits and acceptance. This bridge, when solid, supports crossings that previously seemed impossible. Ultimately, reconciliation restores the heart's chance to be whole. Whole isn't someone who hasn't been hurt. Whole is someone who doesn't let the wound define their essence. Whole is someone who walks through the night without losing their bearings. Whole is someone who learns to inhabit the present with a peace that doesn't deny history, but transfigures it. This state is discreet, but it has light, and this light guides paths around it. It's the kind of revelation that doesn't need a microphone, because it speaks through life. When a heart walks like this, the journey of whoever encounters it also changes direction a little. Right there. I'm on this journey too. Hope, when it's true, isn't just a nice little embellishment. It's a shining star above the desert. The desert is that place where everything seems the same, where the landscape offers no shortcuts and night falls early. Anyone who's been to a desert knows, when daylight fades, the sky opens like a silent screen, and a single star can be the difference between walking and getting lost. It's like that in our inner lives. There are nights when anxiety presses like a cold wind. There are days when loneliness throbs, and almost always the instinct is to accelerate our steps without direction, as if speed could compensate for the lack of direction. In these moments, hope works like that star. It doesn't shout, it doesn't change the terrain, but gently points where our feet need to go. And this direction, however discreet it may seem, has a tangible impact on the decisions of those tired of spinning in circles. The beauty of this image is realizing that the star doesn't invent a ready-made path. It offers you an axis. With each step, you confirm the route. With each deviation, you correct it. Adult hope works behind the scenes of the mindset. It exchanges catastrophic imagination for a commitment to truth, replaces dark predictions with simple choices that keep the soul airy. It's a continuous process of transformation, a window that opens at dawn to let the cold air renew the house. The desert remains deserted, but you stop walking like someone fleeing and start walking like someone trusting. And it is precisely in this trust, discreet and insistent, that the night becomes less threatening, because the heart learns to recognize the sky's design. When anxiety hits, the whole body becomes an antenna. The mind races, the breath is shallow, and thoughts jump from one bad hypothesis to the worse. Hope doesn't promise a magical deactivation. It promises training, attention training, focus training, breathing training. This is where the exercise of writing down 3 promises or phrases of faith gains strength. I'm not talking about an amulet, I'm talking about an anchor. Writing on paper in your own hand, without rushing 3 sentences that resonate as truth for you. Something like "I am not alone, grace is sufficient for me today, love casts out fear." They can be words you know from scripture or short phrases that summarize your confidence. The gesture is simple, but there are hidden revelations within it. By transforming faith into a phrase, you give your heart ground to rest on when the wind kicks up sand. These 3 lines read quietly when your chest tightens, organize within your soul what chaos wants to disperse. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because hope isn't naive optimism, it's discipline. It's committing to small routines that keep the flame burning even when nothing around seems to cooperate. Hope adjusts sleep schedules, sets limits on what drains the mind, chooses relationships that nourish rather than sabotage. It transforms the way we work, less self-sabotage, more consistency, and the way we rest, less escape, more genuine care. This silent discipline creates a kind of internal compass. You begin to identify more quickly what brings you closer to the light and what pushes you into the shadows. And with this identification, choices cease to be a minefield and become a map. The route isn't easy, but it becomes understandable. The metaphor of the star over the desert also speaks of rhythm. In the heat of the day, walking too much saps energy. In the early morning, with the sky clear, a steady, measured stride takes you far. Hope teaches this rhythm, neither paralysis nor rushing. In practical terms, it means organizing your day around 2 or 3 non-negotiable commitments: a brief, sincere prayer, some kind of genuine service, a gesture of care for your body, and allowing the rest to revolve around this axis. It's a reordering that seems small, yet it alters the landscape within. Those who live this way are not governed by worst-case scenarios. They are guided by the best purpose they recognize, and it is this purpose that prevents anxiety from setting the tone for all internal conversations. There's a hidden truth here. Hope doesn't ignore pain, but it doesn't idolize it. It looks at fatigue, gives it a name, and then chooses a gesture that points to life. Sometimes, that gesture is getting out of bed and opening the window. Sometimes, it's drinking water and breathing slowly, counting to 4 on the inhale and to 6 on the exhale. Sometimes, it's sending a message asking for help, accepting that maturity also means recognizing limits. Hope has this practical generosity. It doesn't demand heroic performances. It demands fidelity to the little things that keep the heart warm. And when the heart warms, the desert changes color, not because the sand has become a garden, but because you've learned to walk in a more human way. Writing the 3 promises or phrases of faith begins a mini ritual that can be repeated precisely in moments of darkness. Imagine the scene. You identify anxiety approaching, pick up the paper, slowly read the phrases you chose, and then remain silent for a minute, as if gazing at a star and aligning your body with the direction. It's brief, but effective. And here comes a detail that makes a difference. Don't choose phrases like someone buying slogans. Choose like someone discovering coordinates. What truly soothes your heart? What revives your courage? Which words remind you of who you are and whom you trust? This intimate curation is a form of prayer. By taking this trouble, you are, without realizing it, fine-tuning your own listening. And listening better to what is true has always been a powerful antidote to noise. You might think hope sounds too abstract for the harshness of your daily life. I understand. That's why it needs a body. And a body is achieved through practice. Set times to reread your 3 promises. Put them in a visible place in your wallet, on your mirror, on your cell phone. Casey Ann, treat them as you would a medicine prescribed by a good doctor. The effect isn't a placebo. Texts, when true, re-educate the internal conversation that happens all day long. And this conversation has consequences. Those who talk well to themselves treat people better, interpret situations more fairly, and position themselves firmly without losing tenderness. It's an applied change of mindset, not theory. There's another layer. Hope protects us from cynicism. Cynicism is that voice that says nothing changes. There's no point in trying. You already know how it ends. This voice feeds on personal statistics, on poorly healed memories, on negative prophecies thrown at us. Hope responds with spiritual facts. I am not my worst day. I don't walk alone. Good, even if discreet, is already at work. And it proves these assertions with daily micro-experiences, a peace that arrives after a breath, a conversation that once escalated and now finds a bridge, a corrosive thought replaced by a helpful gesture. It's not self-deception. It's real change behind the scenes of choices. Cynicism points to the sand. Hope points to the star. When the desert seems too long, the temptation is to invent mirages. Mirages promise shortcuts that exact high interest, quick rewards, pleasures that numb but exact a hangover, distractions that promise lightness but deliver emptiness. Hope doesn't engage in false advertising. It says, the path is long but possible, and you don't have to cross it in darkness. That's why the image of the star is so beloved. It's not a spotlight that turns night into day, but a faithful point that can be safely followed. The fidelity of this point transfers fidelity within. Little by little, you become predictable in the best sense. Someone who, in the face of a storm, returns to anchor. Someone who, in the face of doubt, returns to the 3 lines on paper. Someone who, in the face of provocation, chooses their own integrity. This way of getting through the night changes the way you wait for great revelations. Instead of longing for a word that solves everything, you begin to long for the kind of ear that understands whatever comes. Instead of fantasizing about a future without struggle, you learn to establish today what will sustain you when the struggle hits. Hope trains for the marathon, while many expend energy on the morning sprint. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you profound, and profundity is a rare compliment in a hurried world. A profound person doesn't speak louder, but speaks in a calming tone. They don't run ahead, but maintain the pace that allows them to arrive. If the question recurs, how do I begin? There's a simple path already within reach. Choose the 3 promises or phrases of faith now. Write them in your own handwriting, date them, and keep them in a sacred place. Throughout the week, read them when your chest feels heavy. Add small notes of what you've noticed as you practice them. This loving, repeated attention produces a kind of courage that can't be taught in a lecture, only learned by walking. It's there, on the desert floor, under the stars, that you discover that the night also has music. And that, paradoxically, it's at night that the sky is most generous. The day is beautiful, but the night reveals constellations that excess light hides. By integrating this discipline with what we've already worked on: purity of intention, vigilance and sobriety, prayer and fasting, reconciliation and healing, ceases to be an isolated chapter and becomes the atmosphere where everything breathes. It seals the armor from within, gives elasticity to the fibers of the soul, and prevents a fall from defining the narrative. Instead of a straight line without stumbles, you see a journey that embraces deviations and still moves forward. And this progress is measured in gestures: less haste to judge, more willingness to listen; less thirst for control, more genuine trust; less noise from without, more music from within. This is how the guiding star transforms the night, not by changing the scenery, but by illuminating the path where your feet now touch. If this image resonated with you in any way, leave a quick comment so we can keep this conversation going. Comment: this makes sense to me. Discernment is the art of separating light from false brightness. At first glance, everything that shines seems like an invitation from above. But the soul learns, over time, that there are luminosities that warm and there are neon lights that tire. The difference is rarely in the spectacle and almost always in what remains: peace that endures, humility that grows, the concrete fruit of charity, and coherence with the gospel. This is the simple and demanding combination that protects our journey from confusion. When something touches you deep inside, and, when the emotion subsides, a stable serenity remains. The heart knows there is light. If, on the contrary, there remains a throbbing restlessness, a need to appear, an urgency to convince others, it is worth sounding the alarm. The hidden truth is that haste and vanity know how to disguise themselves as zeal. They confuse because they speak our language of anxiety, and the first act of discernment is to slow down internally so that the decision is not an impulse disguised as inspiration. The peace that endures is not euphoria. Euphoria is foam. It rises quickly, enchants, and disappears. Peace is a river. It runs underneath, sustains you on bends, resists when the day gets tough. If a revelation leaves you unstable, wanting to rush through processes, impatient to obey, something is out of alignment. True peace doesn't cancel out effort, but sustains the pace. It doesn't infantilize. It matures. It doesn't shout. It invites. And it is precisely this texture that exposes the pretense of the spirit of noise. It pushes you onto the stage, fuels comparisons, and measures value by applause. Peace, on the contrary, transforms mindsets without asking for the spotlight. It changes the quality of presence, not just the appearance of things. Humility is another crucial barometer. Where there is God, the capacity to be grateful, to listen, to revise paths without shame grows. Humility isn't thinking less of oneself. It's thinking less of oneself to serve better. It accepts correction, recognizes limits, and doesn't manipulate others with one's own gift. When someone claims to be moved by the highest, but can't bear to be questioned, doesn't submit to anyone, and laughs at simple instructions, it's a warning sign. Heaven doesn't send messages to inflate egos. It sends invitations to lower bridges and bring hearts closer together. A light that doesn't generate humility becomes a reflector of one's own face, and light turned inward blinds. The fruit of charity is a criterion that never fails. After a supposedly spiritual inspiration, do you love better? Speak more sweetly. Serve more discreetly. Forgive more quickly. If the result is harshness, superiority, acidic irony, and unnecessary arguments, be wary. Charity is not sentimentality. It is a gentle force that sustains ordinary life. It is measured in gestures, attention to the weariness of others, patience with those who think differently, care with your tongue, generosity with your time. True revelations don't isolate you in a bubble of enlightened, they return you to the kitchen, to the home, to work, more human and more whole. Nothing is more spiritual than loving better, and so we arrive at coherence with the gospel. The map exists and is open. The Word of God, the perennial teaching of the Church, sacramental life. If a proposal, however brilliant, contradicts the gospel, it is not from God. If it pushes you out of communion, to live without direction, without obedience, without measure, it is not maturity, it is risk. Discernment does not invent new compasses every week. It returns to those that have always pointed north. Therefore, rereading a passage of Scripture, praying with it, situating one's experience within the great history of faith, is a remedy against delusions. Private revelation, when it exists, is always a humble legend for what Christ has already revealed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because deception doesn't arrive with a danger label. It presents itself as a shortcut. That's why haste and vanity are so confusing. Haste seduces by promising immediate impact. Decide now, publish now, speak before thinking. Vanity offers a platform. If it's from God, the world needs to know it came for you. The practical antidote is a triangle: time, trial, and counsel. Time, to let the heart settle and see if peace remains. Trial, to check if the change generates concrete charity and visible humility. Counsel, to place inspiration on the table before someone who knows the way: a confessor, a spiritual director, a person of faith and common sense. Those who walk accompanied stumble less on their own illusions. It works like this in real life. A powerful idea, an invitation, a delicate decision emerges. The impulse wants to respond in minutes. Discerning is breathing, writing down what you felt. Praying, honestly, not a performance, but a frank conversation, and then subjecting the movement to the ruler of criteria. Does the peace that remains sustain the night? Has humility grown, or has the center become my name? Has there been fruit of charity, even if discreet? Is it aligned with the gospel and not just loose phrases I like? If, when passing through this sieve, something creaks, it's a sign that light is still lacking. When light is lacking, the best thing is not to fill it with imagination, but to wait faithfully. To wait without laziness, to continue loving, working, praying, fasting, serving. Time, in this sense, is not a postponement. It is part of revelation. Spiritual direction, when possible, is like the hand of a carpenter who knows the wood and knows where the nail goes in without splitting it. A good director doesn't make decisions for you. He helps you hear God without the noise of your own needs. He asks what no one else asks, gives you responsibilities, encourages you to remain simple, and prevents you from mistaking light for applause. Sometimes, a single piece of advice puts the soul back on track. Other times, direction comes through generous silence, patience, and prayer. In both cases, what you gain is sobriety. And sobriety is golden when the soul is surrounded by competing lights. Discernment also requires caution with the algorithms of the day. Some content is hooked by indignation, others by curiosity, others by refined vanity. The spirit of deception doesn't need you to sin scandalously. It's enough that you lose focus. Therefore, the digital vigilance we mentioned earlier remains valid. Reduce stimuli. Protect your mind. Consume what edifies. When a piece of news, a profile, a trend throws you off balance, ask yourself, does this make me love better? Does it reinforce my coherence? Does it give me peace that endures the night? If the answer is no, turn it off. It's not an escape. It's spiritual intelligence. While the world screams, God continues to prefer the whisper. But discernment doesn't eliminate the cross. There will be days of dryness, of lack of desire, of weary prayer. The peace that endures, precisely because it is profound, doesn't depend on sensations. It doesn't disappear in aridity. It gathers and sustains. Therefore, don't confuse the absence of consolation with the absence of God. When consolation disappears and you continue doing good, coherence grows 10 years in one. It is in this austere terrain that decisions gain strength. The light that pierces the night without making a show is the most trustworthy, and it is in it that the heart is educated to recognize what comes from above when it finally shines. Another delicate point: sometimes the deception isn't in the content, but in the timing. A truth can be spoken at the wrong time and hurt. A righteous step, taken prematurely, can break what should have matured. God's clock includes seasons. Discernment measures seasons as much as it measures intentions. Therefore, when a direction appears, it's worth asking, is it now? A not yet can be a gesture of love, not cowardice. Humility accepts this. Vanity gets irritated, and here's a good detector. If the opposition to a not yet produces disproportionate irritation, it's likely the motivation wasn't as pure as it seemed. In everyday life, all of this translates into discrete habits: rereading the gospel of the day and asking what it touches on in my conversations, presenting sensitive decisions to those in authority over me, choosing words that don't inflate egos, celebrating the fruits of charity rather than acts of self-promotion, and When I make a mistake, because we will correct quickly, a sincere request for forgiveness, a simple restart, without rhetoric. Discernment doesn't create flawless people. It forms whole people. Whole people to lose ground and gain ground. Whole people to give up being right and choose to be truthful. Whole people to listen, change, and remain. In the end. That's it. Discernment means loving intelligently and obeying freely. It means guarding the heart from soft illusions and choosing the solidity that sustains. It means living a spirituality that, instead of promising fireworks, offers light to get through the night. And, as we walk, the simple criteria remain like fixed stars, peace that endures, humility, the fruit of charity, coherence with the gospel, between haste and vanity, choosing God's time, between stage and service, choosing the kitchen, between rumor and truth, choosing the word that builds. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Being a devotee isn't just about looking at the sky. It's about becoming a crack through which the sky passes to reach someone down here. The image of the star returns with force. Each devotee is a small star for someone crossing their own desert, and a small star doesn't compete with the sun. It only needs to shine brightly enough to point the way north. It is in this simple logic that the mission takes shape, to be a presence that guides without fanfare, that warms without burning, that walks alongside without pretending to carry the other in its arms. The great transformation of faith happens when spirituality leaves the discourse and illuminates the kitchen, the hallways, the buses, the short conversations, the monthly bills. It is there that the service mentality reveals its hidden truth. The love you offer silently shapes the world more than any loud advertisement. Impact is not measured in likes, but in quietly repositioned destinations. The mission of devotees is not a task for perfect people. It is the vocation of those who have discovered they were loved first. Those who have been reached by the light learn to distribute it in human doses. And the first step on this journey is concrete and immediate. Choosing a person today to serve, discreetly, not an idealization, but a face. Perhaps someone from your home, perhaps a neighbor you barely greet, perhaps a coworker who always arrives tense, perhaps someone you've been avoiding because the encounter brings back uncomfortable reflections. Choosing a face is leaving the generic and making a decision with a date and time. You stop talking about loving your neighbor as a concept and start loving your neighbor with a name and a story. From there, the heart reorganizes the behind of your agenda moves, revelations cease to be abstractions and become gestures. Gesture, here, takes 1,000 forms. It can be a meal prepared without announcements, a time spent listening without interruptions, a message of encouragement that doesn't become a sermon, a prayer with the person's name and the concrete need they have. It can be picking them up from school, giving them a ride, paying for medicine, accompanying them to the doctor, sharing a contact that opens up an opportunity, forgiving a small debt that bleeds a relationship. The point isn't the size, it's the pure intention and loving discretion. Charity that needs an audience becomes personal marketing. Discreet charity becomes light that doesn't humiliate, and light that doesn't humiliate heals without leaving a shadow. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because serving discreetly isn't just about doing good, it's about accepting that good also shapes those who serve. There's a hidden pedagogy of God in service. As you bend down to wash others' feet, you realize how your pride still craves applause, how your impatience seeks shortcuts, how your neediness loves to be noticed. It's uncomfortable, but it's liberating. Service reveals our inner workings with an honesty that prayer alone sometimes can't achieve. And it's precisely this friction that purifies motivations and refines decisions. Service is a gentle furnace where hardness melts. In the end, those who have been served receive care. Those who have served receive a heart more like Christ's. To prevent this mission from being lost in the good intentions that evaporate, it's worth making a simple agreement with yourself. For 24 hours, this chosen person will be your discreet guide. Ask yourself in the morning, what possible gesture of love can I offer today? Let the answer arise from reality, not fantasy. Maybe it's holding your tongue at the first provocation. Maybe it's genuinely praising something you normally ignore. Maybe it's buying coffee and genuinely asking how the person is. Maybe it's keeping your mouth shut and listening without correcting. Maybe it's simply holding their hand without words. When the gesture is over, don't post. Don't explain yourself. Don't collect credit. Give as if returning to God what came from God. Heaven works with confidences. Silent good is the preferred language of great revelations. That's also important to recognize that the mission of devotees is not a solitary marathon. Light multiplies in a constellation. Small stars, when united, redesign the map of the sky. This is why discreet service is contagious. Someone is touched by a gesture and reproduces it. Another observes it and copies it. And before you know it, a chain of care relearns the community to be a community. The neighborhood becomes less harsh, the family less harsh, the work less cynical. The transformation is slow but real. And if you want to honestly measure the effect of this mission, observe the marks that remain. Is there more lasting peace? Has humility increased? Has the fruit of charity appeared where there was previously wariness? Has coherence with the gospel become more robust? These signs are the trail of light of those who do not wear faith as a badge of honor. But as service.mission also corrects our temptation to greatness. Sometimes we want to change the world and don't wash the dishes. We want to evangelize the nations and don't return calls to those who need 5 minutes of attention. It's not about despising the great pits, it's about understanding the engineering of grace. Greatness is born from the small, faithful. God often chooses humble doors. The love you offer to the person in front of you is the laboratory for greater missions that may or may not arrive. And it's okay if they don't. Because the opposite of spectacle isn't irrelevance, it's fidelity. Fidelity has an impact. Even when the scoreboard isn't on the big screen, those who take on this mission will notice unplanned internal changes. Their gaze slows, their listening becomes more profound. Their words lose their irony. Haste gives way to a serene readiness. Cynicism loses its place, because the concrete experience of loving restores faith in the possibility of good. The mind, which loved theorizing and debate, rediscovers that truth without tenderness turns to stone. The heart acquires a new sense of proportion. Problems that seemed gigantic shrink when you begin to serve. In dramas you hid from yourself gently emerge, begging for care. The mission doesn't distract you from yourself, it returns you to yourself more fully. Of course, there will be oversights, noise, frustrations. Sometimes you'll offer and not be noticed. Sometimes you'll be misunderstood. Sometimes you'll be rejected. Don't turn this into an internal soap opera. Serve and move on. Love doesn't count returns. It learns from limits, adjusts routes, preserves dignity, and continues without making one's own pain the center of the story. This is how the mission becomes a lifestyle and not a temporary project. Quiet constancy corrects the temptation of vain intensity. And when constancy sets in, a silent revelation occurs. You realize that serving wasn't a burden. It was oxygen. 2. Keep the flame from dying. Feed it with memory. At the end of the day, revisit the choice you made. What was the gesture? What was born from it, inside and out? Where is there still hardness needing polishing? Transform these answers into prayer and offer up the successes and the setbacks. Service, seen through this lens, doesn't exhaust you, it organizes you. You discover that time spent with love returns multiplied in meaning. You discover that attentive presence yields more than hours of distraction. You discover that readiness for good generates creativity, and that the creativity of love invents solutions that cold logic cannot see. Perhaps the fear of not being able to handle so much demand arises. The mission of devotees is not to embrace the world, it is to embrace what God places within reach today. One person, one gesture, one day. Tomorrow, another story. It's not about becoming anyone's savior, it's about being a bridge. Those who are bridges support others' crossings without considering themselves a road. And, like any bridge that endures, you need maintenance, prayer that centers you, fasting that frees you, reconciliation that heals you, hope that guides you, discernment that protects you. Everything we've worked on so far converges toward this, being an accessible light. And if you lack courage, borrow the method of small beginnings. Write the person's name, choose the gesture, write it down in your notebook. Date, action, intention, not to collect trophies, but to create paths. Paths simplify future decisions. Over time, you'll realize you don't need to think so much to love. Love becomes a trained reflex. And when love becomes a reflex, life becomes lighter. Even when it doesn't get easier, you walk with less internal noise and more purpose. And purpose, on long nights, is like a star. It doesn't change the terrain, but it keeps the soul from getting lost. There's a mature happiness hidden in this mission. It's not euphoria, it's solidity. You'll go to bed with the gentle feeling of having done your part and, therefore, being able to rest. You'll wake up with the simple question that moves mountains. Who is my neighbor today? This question is a key. Whoever carries it never runs out of things to do. There's always someone to love within arm's reach, and when many devotees begin to live this way, the maps change. No one sees the exact moment, but suddenly the neighborhood is brighter, the conversations less harsh, the children more protected, the elderly less invisible. The light grew, visited cracks, built bridges. And it all began with one person chosen. On an ordinary day, if this call struck you as an invitation rather than a demand, leave a small clue, just so I know we're walking in this direction together. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. When I look back at everything we've traveled so far, I see a golden thread running through each step. Purity of heart as a clear lens for seeing. Vigilance and sobriety as border guards. Prayer and fasting as armor that protects from within. Reconciliation as a bridge that restores wholeness. Hope as a guiding star over the desert. Discernment as a compass against deception. And mission as the discreet light that ignites other lights. These are not isolated ideas. They are pieces of the same spiritual engineering. Together, they form a map of transformation that traverses ordinary days with quiet dignity. And it is at this everyday level, in the tone of words, in small decisions, in the way we deal with time and our own vulnerability, that the hidden truth takes shape and impacts the entire journey. You realize how the scenes have changed when, faced with the same provocation as yesterday, another response emerges today. Less noise and more presence, less haste and more purpose. Purity taught us to ask why. Before, how? To purify intentions so that the gesture isn't just pretty on the surface. Vigilance sharpened attention, cut out distractions, and restored focus. And sobriety set a firm tone without losing delicacy. Prayer and fasting strengthened the will, restored freedom from impulses, and created inner space for God to whisper. Reconciliation cleared memories that ruled beneath the surface, restored command of the present, and redefined scars. Hope taught us a compass in the desert, ignited small anchors of faith so the mind wouldn't be swept away by the wind. Discernment, in turn, separated light from false brightness, prevented shortcuts, and sustained the right timing of things. And mission, perhaps the sweetest fruit, transformed all this into real service, reminding us that kept grace sours, but shared grace turns to bread. Overall, the heart gained a new mindset, less about being right, more about being true, less about winning, more about building, less about appearing, more about bearing fruit. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what I've summarized isn't a checklist for strong people, it's a path for real people. Each point has a human counterpoint. Purity clashes with vanity, vigilance with dispersion, fasting with compensation, reconciliation with pride, hope with cynicism, discernment with haste, mission with poorly healed self-love. It's not just theory, it's a gentle, everyday struggle. And the beauty is discovering that God isn't frightened by our slowness. He works in process, writes at the rhythm of our breathing. If you stumble, the map isn't lost. You start over from where you are, not from where you should be. This is how the road becomes livable, with quick forgiveness, with small and constant adjustments, with simple choices that, together, reshape inner landscapes. Perhaps you can see yourself in this narrative. At some point, one practice appealed to you, more vigilance, prayer, forgiveness, and another wounded your pride. That's okay. The road accepts unevenness. What's useless is that timid perfectionism that prizes. The idea isn't to collect virtues, it's to breathe with more truth. And truth, when it enters, brings revelations without fanfare. You discover that you can say no without guilt, that silence can be a mature response, that distancing yourself from toxic content is intelligence, not escape, that serving a dish or offering a listening ear is worth more than winning an argument. These revelations reorganize priorities. Little by little, you stop measuring life by external victories and start celebrating it by internal coherence. And coherence is the kind of impact that doesn't need a microphone, it reverberates in relationships, in work, in the way you occupy your own life. If I could condense everything into a symbolic gesture for editing, it would be this: inviting you to breathe silently for a few seconds and let what was said descend from your intellect to your chest. In practical video, it's a short snippet, 5 to 10 seconds, with a soft soundtrack, almost a reverential pause, not to conclude, but to allow the seed to find soil. It's in this gentle interval that great decisions begin to blossom, because mature decisions aren't born on the stage of impulse, they're born in the wings of presence. And when presence becomes habit, life changes color in layers. First, the look in your eyes, then the tone of your voice, then your habits, and finally, the scenarios. External reality doesn't always change immediately, but the way we navigate it changes, and that's already a miracle of everyday life. That's why the phrase, "I offer you now," carries special weight. May the morning star illuminate your decisions. It's more than a poetic blessing, it's a guiding light. Decisions are daily crossroads. What to see and what to avoid, who to respond to and who to silence, when to advance and when to wait, where to insist and where to let go. Illuminated, they cease to be leaps into the dark and become acts of faith with a direction. And, illuminated, they gain a criterion you already know by heart: lasting peace, humility, the fruit of charity, coherence with the gospel. If the light passes through this filter and remains, move forward. If it fades, pray again, adjust course, seek advice. There's no shame in taking a while to respond. Shame is rushing when the heart isn't yet ready. Maturity knows that the not yet is also a revelation. At the same time, this blessing restores to you the beautiful agency of those who participate in their own story. We are not spectators, we are co-responsible. When you choose purity of intention, defend the vigilance of the heart, offer a small sacrifice, forgive what needs to be forgiven, sustain hope, filter what comes your way, and serve someone in silence. You are writing new lines in the book of your lifelines that heaven reads with joy. It's not a romanticization of effort, it's a recognition of a partnership. God does what you cannot. You offer yourself and what He asks. And, in this dance, revelations cease to be merely awaited content and become learned movements. The spiritual body gains memory. the next night you already know where the star is, even if the clouds try to hide it. If at any point you felt small in the face of the ideal, breathe. The path doesn't require superheroes, it demands faithfulness, and faithfulness is the one who falls and gets up, who learns and relearns, who loves, and, when unable to do so, borrows love. The castle of spiritual life is not built all at once. It is laid stone by stone, with pauses, with mistakes, with repairs. And it is precisely this patient construction that prevents everything from collapsing at the first gust of wind. That's why the contemplative pause now makes sense. It seals what has already been planted, without closing off what is yet to be woven. It honors God's timing, which, at times, is swift as lightning, but almost always gentle as the dawn dot. As the soft music draws this breath and the images slow down, let the phrase flow through you like clear water over stone. May the morning star illuminate your decisions. Let it visit the crossroads you face, that difficult conversation, that professional choice, that necessary frontier, that request for forgiveness, that generosity you've been putting off. Illuminating isn't forcing, it's showing. And when it becomes clear, the step may be small, but it's firm. Firmness doesn't shout, it treads with conviction and gentleness. This combination is the mark of those who walk with heaven close by. Because our journey doesn't end here, I leave this bridge open ahead, where we will unfold what has been sown, and touch on even finer layers of this same calling, maintaining the coherence that has brought us to this point. Before we continue, I want to hear your heartbeat alongside mine, not to measure reach, but to recognize communion. Comment, I want to be liked, if this conversation clarified something deep inside you and helped you make decisions with more peace of mind. It makes sense for us to continue walking together. Subscribe to the channel to receive, calmly and in a timely manner, future content along these same lines designed to serve you in real life, not just thrill you for a few minutes. And let me know in the comments that you made it to the end, right? I'm with you until the end, or this message was for me. I enjoy reading and understanding how the content found you. If the video resonated with you, leave a like now. It's simple, but it keeps our connection alive and signals that it's worth continuing to explore these topics in depth. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click it and stay with me there. We'll continue the journey to the next step with the same lightness and depth.